Good morning. Good morning, Boob. All right. Thank you. So, in our previous lecture, we were talking about Akbar's religious policy, and we had seen how his religious policy could be divided into three phases. Firstly, before 1579, sorry, before 15, let us say 70. Secondly, between 1570 to 1582. And thirdly, from 1582 onwards, right? Now, during this entire period, Akbar's religious policy kept on evolving continuously. The general feature of his religious policy was that it was a tolerant one. He followed a policy based upon secularism. His idea was that the emperor's office is not simply a temporal institution, but also a spiritual one. It is towards the third stage that the transformation of the emperor's office from a purely temporal to a universal, that is spiritual as well as a temporal office, began emerging in a more consolidated manner, right? Towards the end of the second period, we had seen how his Madharnama, the infallibility decree, and the adoption of certain titles which were traditionally reserved for the Islamic prophet, that had resulted in a major rebellion against him in the 1580s, in the early 1580s, 1581, 82, right? And from 1582 onwards, Akbar realized his mistake in using religious symbols in order to fulfill his political objectives, right? So he had adopted, or he had tried to usurp the role of the ulemas. He had also tried to claim equality with the caliph, equality with the prophet, etc. So all of these were Islamic symbols which he had tried to co-opt for his own political designs. That had backfired, and now, in order to rectify that, Akbar decided to undermine the role of religion itself from statecraft. And it was in response to this new approach that he introduced the Din-i-Ilahi, also known as the Tawheed-e-Ilahi. Now, earlier, the colonial historians put forward the idea that this was a new religion introduced by Akbar. Colonial scholars led by Vincent Smith claimed that it was a new religion introduced by Akbar. Smith criticized Akbar that the Din-i-Ilahi was a reflection of Akbar's growing hubris. Akbar was no longer satisfied simply by claiming equality with the Prophet. Rather, he wanted to start a new religion in his own image. So it was a product of Akbar's arrogance. However, Akbar got his due when the Din-i-Ilahi fell flat. It did not receive any takers. Mir Zulfikar observed that the total number of adherents who had accepted the Din-i-Ilahi was only 19. So it was also a complete failure since it was not able to attract any followers due to its unpopularity. In fact, Vincent Smith called the Din-i-Ilahi the monument of Akbar's folly. Right? However, with a new perspective on the Din-i-Ilahi, Vincent Smith's interpretation has also come under greater scrutiny and a new idea is emerging. First of all, it has becoming increasingly clear that Smith's opinion was quite inaccurate. In fact, it was flawed. Firstly, due to the natural dislike that colonial historians had towards the Mughals in general and Akbar in particular, that is reflected in Smith's opinions, Smith's interpretation. So, inherent colonial bias colored Smith's interpretation. Secondly, Smith was relying upon intensely biased accounts regarding the Din-i-Ilahi by historians such as Montserrat or Mir Dulfikar or Badayuni, etc. Right? So their opinions were also not objective, were not rational. So he had access to biased sources which colored his understanding of the true nature of the Din-i-Ilahi. Since all these previous scholars had interpreted the Din-i-Ilahi as a new religion introduced by Akbar, Smith naturally adopted their ideas in his own scholarly work, scholarly enterprise. And as a result, he failed to understand the true nature of the Din-i-Ilahi. Right? In his opinion, the Din-i-Ilahi was a new religion, and the success or failure of any religion is measured in terms of its numerical followership. Followership, right? So the number of its followers, and thus he took numerical strength to be the parameter for measuring the success of the Din-i-Ilahi, but it was a wrong parameter. And why are we saying that it was a wrong parameter? Because the Din-i-Ilahi was not, in fact, any new religion introduced by Akbar. And in light of the challenge that has been given by recent historiography to Smith's opinions, a new perspective on the Din-i-Ilahi has emerged. Firstly, that it was not a new religion introduced by Akbar because it did not have any of the traditional characteristics of any religion. For example, there was no dedicated scripture, there was no hierarchy of clergy, there was no fixed set of practices or rituals associated with this religion. And nor was there any holy site associated with the religion that the followers needed to visit regularly as part of a ritual pilgrimage. So it was not a new religion. So if it was not a new religion, what in fact was the Din-i-Ilahi? It was the final step taken by Akbar to formalize his Padshahat, the institution of emperorhood, into a universal institution, not simply a secular office, but a secular as well as spiritual office. Akbar, through the Din-i-Ilahi, wanted to position himself at the very center of the spiritual, moral, as well as material fabric of the state, right? So it was Akbar's attempt to formalize the Mughal institution of kingship as a universal, that is temporal as well as spiritual office, not simply a temporal one. By doing this, he was trying to eliminate the influence of the religious class, that is the ulema, from politics in an absolute and more complete manner. Secondly, Akbar was trying to create a large all India empire, which would have required him to get the cooperation of diverse sections of powerful regional nobles. And the Dine-Ilahi was meant to act as a common platform for integrating India's diverse nobility. It was a common platform to integrate India's diverse nobility. Thirdly, with the Din-i-Ilahi, Akbar was trying to position the Mughal emperor at the very center of the of not only the material power structure but also the spiritual structure of the state. So it was an attempt to introduce, or let us say it was an attempt to place the emperor at the very center of the state's material and spiritual fabric, right? And finally, The Din-i-Ilahi was meant to establish a direct relationship between the emperor and its adherents. That is, it was meant to inspire a new kind of loyalty that transcended the bonds of real power. So he wanted his followers to accept the Mughal emperor as their spiritual guide, as their peer or guru, right? So it was meant to establish a direct personal bond of loyalty between the emperor and his followers, which transcended the traditional relationship defined by coercive control. Rather, Akbar wanted spiritual and ideological control over his followers. Okay? So, the Din-i-Ilahi was therefore not in fact a religion at all. Rather, it was a political tool introduced by Akbar in order to enhance royal despotism to never before seen levels. And it is in this context that the Din-i-Ilahi must be evaluated. And with this perspective, it is clear that Smith's opinion regarding the Din-i-Ilahi as the monument of Akbar's folly is flawed, right? तो जो पैरामीटर है that is numerical strength of the total number of followers on the basis of this new perspective that the Din-i-Ilahi was not a new religion, rather it was a political tool, is a flawed parameter. Okay? And therefore, it would be unfair to judge the success of the Din-i-Ilahi based upon numerical strength alone. But even if we do that, even then, a further flaw emerges in Smith's opinion regarding the Din-i-Ilahi. Now, what are the methods generally used to spread any religion? Forcible conversions, inducements, propagation through proselytization, etc. Right? Akbar never indulged in any of these activities. Akbar never forced anyone to accept the Din-i-Ilahi. Further, those who voluntarily accepted the Din-i-Ilahi did not receive any benefits out of it, any material benefits out of it. So, no inducements were also offered. Okay? Akbar never unduly rewarded those who accepted the Din-i-Ilahi or discriminated against those who did not. Thirdly, Akbar never tried to propagate the Din-i-Ilahi among the masses. The Din-i-Ilahi was directed only at the elite sections of the Mughal society, the high-ranking mansabdars only. And therefore, जो टारगेट पूल है वही बहुत छोटा था. एट द मोस्ट मनसबदार्स हु अकबर वुड हैव वांटेड टू जॉइन द दीन इलाही, उस समय 1000 ही मनसबदार्स का साइज बहुत छोटा था. नॉट इवन 1000 सच मनसबदार्स एग्जिस्टेड. सो 1000 लोगों के पूल में लाखों का तो आपको फॉलोअरशिप नहीं मिल पाएगा, राइट? एंड thus, even if we consider numerical strength to be the only parameter, then the Din-i-Ilahi was not a failure when we take all these things into context, right? And finally, the re-evaluation of the Din-i-Ilahi also brings us to its impact or significance. Impact क्या हुआ इसका? First of all, it became a very important part of Akbar's evolving theory of kingship and continued to define the Mughal theory of kingship for the future generations of emperors also. So it became, or it emerged as an important part of Akbar's theory of kingship. Secondly, the Din-i-Ilahi was the living embodiment of the theory of Sulh-e-Kul, which imagined the Mughal Empire as a universal realm where religious discrimination had no place. Right? In its place, there was universal peace, which was formalized by Akbar through the Din-i-Ilahi. So it served as the physical manifestation of the Sulh-e-Kul. Thirdly, it was the Din-i-Ilahi which gave effect to Akbar's idea of universal kingship. So it formalized the idea of universal kingship, and finally, although the number of followers remained tiny, only 19 people ever joined the Din-i-Ilahi, but it was able to integrate the diverse sections of the nobility in a personal relationship with the emperor in a manner that had never been attained earlier. So it also helped integrating the Mughal nobility under the emperor. And based on this analysis, the Din-i-Ilahi should not be considered to be a monument of Akbar's folly, but it was the monument of Akbar's ultimate success. Okay? Thus, the Din-i-Ilahi was a remarkable success. Had it been a failure, would Akbar's successors have continued to issue the Din-i-Ilahi? No, they would have discontinued it. But Jahangir continued the practice of giving Shasta to his followers. Now, the Shasta was the initiation ceremony of the Din-i-Ilahi. तो दो stages में accept करते थे लोग Din-i-Ilahi को. Shasta was the first stage in which they had a personal attendance with the emperor. The emperor would embrace them, they would exchange certain gifts, and the emperor would whisper into their ear the words Allahu Akbar, God is great, right? So this was continued by Jahangir as well. Had it been a failure, it would have been discarded. And lastly, Akbar was not the only contemporary ruler to have done such a thing. The Safavid rulers of Persia also experimented with similar ideas, right? And with this piece of information, a completely fresh perspective regarding the Din-i-Ilahi emerges. At that point of time, there were three prominent Islamic powers. They are also known as the three gunpowder empires of Asia. कौन-कौन से? The Mughals in India, the Safavids in Persia and the Ottomans in Turkey. ठीक है? Out of these, the Ottomans were the oldest. The Ottoman dynasty had emerged sometime during the 13th century. ठीक है? They were the oldest. And the Ottoman emperor, the Ottoman Sultan, had the added distinction of being recognized by the entire Islamic world as its universal caliph, Khalifa. So the Khilafat of the Islamic world resided in the office of the Ottoman Sultan. And this made the Ottoman Sultan ideologically superior both to the Safavids as well as the Mughals. Now the Mughals and Safavids ये क्या कोशिश कर रहे हैं? To break away from the ideological shackles of the Ottoman Caliph, and thus in both these cases the idea of universal kingship is going to emerge. ठीक है? Why? Because the idea of universal kingship is the basis of the bid of both these powers to claim equality with the Ottoman Khalifa. As a bid to claim equality with the caliph. Now, this conflict amongst these three gunpowder empires was not limited only to the ideological or spiritual realm. Rather, it also had physical manifestations. For example, physical conflicts existed between the Safavid and the Ottoman empires. तो बहुत लंबे समय तक इन्होंने almost 200 साल तक एक दूसरे से continuous जंगें लड़ी. And from the 17th century onwards, the warmth of the Safavid-Mughal relationship also began cooling down because of emerging territorial conflicts to India's northwest. Kabul, Kandahar region में दोनों interested थे. The Safavids also, the Mughals also, right? And it is in this spiritual and material context that the Din-i-Ilahi should be appreciated as Akbar's attempt not only to claim equality with the Ottoman Khalifa, but to claim equality with the Shah of Iran, who had already introduced the concept of universal kingship, and thus Akbar needed to respond with his own version. ठीक है? कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड किया? विद दी दीन-ए-इलाही. क्लियर? So it is in this light that the Din-i-Ilahi must be evaluated. Now, two stages में the Din-i-Ilahi had to be accepted by the followers. The first stage or initiation ceremony was the Shasta, and the second ceremony, or the communion ceremony was the तौहीद. तो शास्त्र में तो बताया है ना क्या होता था कि फेस टू फेस मीटिंग होता था, पर्सनल अटेंडेंस, एंड द न्यू डिवोटी वाज वेलकम्ड बाय द एम्परर through personal embrace and exchange of gifts. In the Tawheed ceremony, the follower transformed into a devotee of the emperor, right? And promised to sacrifice not only his property and life for the emperor, but even his family and religion for the emperor. And emperor was now accepted as the peer or guru of the devotee and promised to protect his devotees' property, life, family, and religion against all threats. Okay? So, a reciprocal material as well as a spiritual relationship between the emperor and the devotee, between the guru and the devotee, was confirmed through the communion ceremony, the Tawheed ceremony. Clear है? तो यहाँ पे आपको क्या लग रहा है? Was the Din-i-Ilahi any new religion introduced by Akbar? It was not, right? And Smith's opinion is therefore flawed. Clear है? Right. Online students, is this clear? All right. Good. Do you want me to dictate any of this stuff or shall we move ahead? अकबर की राजपूत पॉलिसी पर. Dictate करना है? All right. So very briefly, you may write all of this down. लिखो. Stage 3. 1582 onwards. लिखो. Following the series of rebellions in the early 1580s, Akbar realized that he had made a mistake by trying to use religious symbolism to centralize power. Next point. Now he decided to undermine the role of religion itself in statecraft. In statecraft. Full stop. Next point. The result of this approach was the introduction of the Din-i-Ilahi or Tawhid-e-Ilahi. Din-i-Ilahi or Tawhid-e-Ilahi in 1582. Next point. It was a syncretic creed, a syncretic creed which borrowed elements from several religions introduced by Akbar to fulfill his political objectives. To fulfill his political objectives. Next point. However, the interpretation of the Din-i-Ilahi has ignited a fierce debate. Has ignited a fierce debate. The interpretation of the Din-i-Ilahi has ignited a fierce debate. Next point. Colonial historians led by Vincent Smith. Colonial historians led by Vincent Smith claimed that the Din-i-Ilahi was a new religion introduced by Akbar. Introduced by Akbar. Full stop. Subpoint. According to them, it was a product of Akbar's arrogance. It was a product of Akbar's arrogance. Since he was not satisfied by claiming equality with the Prophet, and wanted to transform himself into a living God on earth. Into a living God on earth. ठीक है? Next subpoint. These colonial scholars also highlight the failure of the Din-i-Ilahi by pointing to its unpopularity. With Smith, calling the Din-i-Ilahi the monument of Akbar's folly. The monument of Akbar's folly को inverted commas में कर देना. Calling the Din-i-Ilahi the monument of Akbar's folly. ठीक है. Next main point. However, recent historiography has challenged the colonial interpretation by highlighting the flaws of Smith's opinions. Subpoints 1, 2, and 3. Number 1. It has been pointed out that Smith suffered from the inherent colonial bias against the Mughals in general and Akbar in particular. Number 2. Secondly, Smith relied upon the writings of scholars such as Badayuni, who was frustrated with Akbar's religious liberalism and Montserrat, who was frustrated because he had failed in converting Akbar to Christianity. Third subpoint number 3. Lastly, the Din-i-Ilahi was misunderstood by Smith as a new religion. Full stop. Therefore, the parameter of numerical strength to measure the success of the Din-i-Ilahi was inherently flawed. ठीक है? Next main point. Based on this understanding, a new perspective regarding the Din-i-Ilahi has emerged. regarding the Din-i-Ilahi has emerged. Number one, it was not a new religion. It was not a new religion. Since it did not have any of the characteristics of a traditional religion, such as its own scripture, clergy, rituals, or pilgrimage. Next point. Number two. On the other hand, on the other hand, comma, it was, in fact, a political tool utilized by Akbar to centralize power. To centralize power. Full stop. Sub point. With the दीन इलाही, इसी सेकंड पॉइंट में ही सब पॉइंट लिखो. With the दीन इलाही, Akbar formalized the Mughal Padshahat as a spiritual institution. PADSHAT. बादशाहत पादशाहत सेम चीज होता है, ठीक है. पर्शियन में इट इज कॉल्ड पादशाहत. मुगल पादशाहत as a spiritual institution. Next sub point. हाँ, इसी सेकंड वाले में ही अगला सब पॉइंट लिखो. It created a common platform to integrate the diverse Indian nobility. The diverse Indian nobility. Next sub point. It placed the emperor. It placed the emperor at the very center of the spiritual, material, and moral fabric of the state. Next sub point. It allowed Akbar to engage the nobility in a more personal and direct manner that transcended the previous you can say previous basis of forced loyalty, of forced loyalty. ठीक है? Next main point. On this basis, since the Din-i-Ilahi was not a religion at all, it would be unfair to judge its success only on the basis of its numerical strength. Only on the basis of its numerical strength. Full stop. But even if one was to do this, but even if this was to be done or one was to do this, comma, certain facts need to be considered. Sub points likho 1, 2, 3. Number 1, Akbar never forced anyone to accept the Din-i-Ilahi. Number 2, those who accepted it voluntarily were not rewarded or given special treatment. Those who accepted it voluntarily were not rewarded or given special treatment. And number 3, Akbar never tried to popularize it among the masses. Full stop. It was firmly oriented only towards the elite sections. Only towards the elite sections. Full stop. Since the target pool was extremely small, it is not surprising that the total number of adherents also remained small. ठीक है? Next point. Next main point. The true success of the Din-i-Ilahi can be understood in light of its impact or significance. Subpoints 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1. It emerged as a prominent characteristic of Mughal kingship. Number 2. It aligned with and became the physical manifestation of Akbar's policy of Sulah-e-Kul. Number 3. It formalized the Mughal idea of universal kingship. And number 4, it helped integrating the Mughal nobility. It helped integrating the Mughal nobility under the emperor. Next main point. The Din-i-Ilahi's success as a political tool can also be gauged by the fact that it was continued by Jahangir and not discarded. Next main point. In fact, recently, a new dimension in this debate has emerged, which establishes the Din-i-Ilahi as a foreign policy tool as well. Full stop. Subpoint. The Safavids of Persia had also experimented with similar ideas. Full stop. Next subpoint. In this context, it is important to consider that during the 17th century, during the 16th and 17th centuries, comma, three major Islamic powers in Asia were competing for ideological and material dominance. These were the Mughals, the Safavids, and the Ottomans. Mughals, the Safavids, and the Ottomans. The Ottoman Emperor had the additional distinction of being the Islamic Khalifa or Caliph. Full stop. Next sub point. Thus, the Din-i-Ilahi represented the Mughal bid to claim equality with the Caliph and transform Mughal sovereignty into a universal model of kingship. Full stop. The Safavids also responded with their own version of universal kingship. ठीक है. Now, in fact, ये जो relationship है ना, this is also reflected in the contemporary art. तो अगर आप मुगल कोर्ट के आर्ट को देखोगे जहां पर रॉयल पोर्ट्रेट्स बनाए जाते हैं, तो वहां पर कुछ सीन्स तो रियल होते हैं, दैट इज टेकन फ्रॉम द कोर्ट, एंड कुछ सीन्स इमेजिन्ड होते हैं. तो जो इमेजिन्ड सीन्स होते हैं वहां पे मान लो कि मुगल एम्परर है जहांगीर. He is not going to be shown as the junior of the Safavid Shah or the Ottoman Emperor. या तो उनसे सीनियर दिखाया जाएगा, कद काठी में ज्यादा बड़ा दिखाया जाएगा, या फिर he is seated in a more elevated position, or he'll be shown as their equals. For example, there is a portrait of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir meeting with the Safavid Shah, एंड दोनों को एक दूसरे से बराबरी का रिलेशनशिप दिखाया गया है. They are both embracing each other and both of them are standing atop a single globe. ठीक है, तो एक की पूरे के पूरे जहान के ऊपर these two equal rulers are ruling. Similarly, there is another portrait of Jahangir where he is shown sitting at the equal status of a very prominent Hindu saint. ठीक है, तो उससे बराबरी का रिश्ता है, तो he is also the spiritual leader of his realm, जैसे कि वो हिंदू सेंट है. बट एट द सेम टाइम जो सफाविद शाह और ऑटोमन एम्पायर की एम्परर की तस्वीरें हैं, वो कैसे दिखाई गई हैं, एज इफ दे आर दी डिवोटीज ऑफ दीज टू पर्सनालिटीज, दैट हिंदू सेंट एंड दी मुगल एम्परर. तो उनको नीचे बैठाया हुआ है. तो इस तरह का आइकॉनोग्राफी यूज किया गया मुगल पेंटिंग्स में भी in order to highlight this emerging relationship between these three powers. where all three of them were competing against each other, not only for material but also intellectual ideological superiority. Clear? तो ये हो गया, ठीक है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, हाँ, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. In light of these arguments, in light of these arguments, comma, we have no choice but to conclude that the Din-i-Ilahi was in fact remarkably successful, remarkably successful, in fact, remarkably successful in fulfilling its political objectives, its political objectives. ठीक है. एंड एक बॉक्स बना करके आप ये एक्स्ट्रा इंफॉर्मेशन ले सकते हो that Din-i-Ilahi was offered in two stages. Initiation ceremony known as Shasta and communion ceremony known as Tawheed. इसको इलाहा भी बोलते थे. इलाहा, right? Is this clear, guys? महबूब, प्रतीक, ऋतुजा. All right. ठीक है. तो ये हो गया the religious policy of Akbar. Take down a question. How did Akbar use his religious policy to fulfill his political objectives? Question mark. 200 words. Now, to address this, of course, you will be talking about Din-i-Ilahi, but that is not the only thing that you will be talking about. यहाँ पे तीनों stages के बारे में बात करनी होगी आपको, ठीक है? So, stage 1, what were the important developments that we saw? Banning of forcible conversions of prisoners of war. Banning the pilgrimage tax and banning the jizya. Now, all this was done to do what? To create an atmosphere of tolerance, religious tolerance, non-discrimination. It was to gather the support of not only the powerful Rajput chiefs but also the general masses. ठीक है? It was also designed to undermine the power of the ulemas, क्योंकि उनके अगेंस्ट एक नया पावर सेंटर खड़ा हो रहा था, तो it was meant to counterbalance the ulemas. सेकेंड स्टेज क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है? दी इबादत खाना डिस्कशंस एंड दी मजहरनामा. यहाँ पे टारगेट क्या है? क्लियरली दी ulemas, which Akbar is trying to elbow out of power by usurping its role, right? However, this is going to backfire, leading to the introduction of the Din-i-Ilahi. अब इसका ऑब्जेक्टिव और इम्पैक्ट आपको बताना होगा. क्लियर है? हो जाएगा. And while you are outlining these three stages, you don't simply have to talk about the developments that have taken place, but the real intention of Akbar, political objectives of Akbar behind all these changes. ठीक है? So that is what we need to do over here. Address कर लेंगे इसको. ठीक है. Second question. The Din-i-Ilahi was the monument of Akbar's folly. Discuss critically. टू 200 वर्ड्स 15 मार्क्स. यहाँ पे पता है कैसे करना है? जो हमने अभी पूरा डिस्कशन किया है, दैट यू हैव टू एनकैप्सुलेट विद इन 200 वर्ड्स. तो विंसेंट स्मिथ का जो ओपिनियन है उसके पीछे रैशनल क्या है, व्हाई इट इज फ्लॉड, and what is the new perspective regarding the Din-i-Ilahi, why it should not be considered as a monument of Akbar's folly, rather as a remarkable success in attaining the important political objectives of Akbar. Clear? So these two questions I hope you'll be able to address. And finally, we have Akbar's Rajput policy. Was Akbar the first Muslim ruler in India to maintain some kind of relationship with the Rajputs? No, उसके पहले भी कई सारे थे. So Akbar was not, you can say, path breaker in this field, but he was certainly an innovator, because the way in which he managed his Rajput relations was not seen earlier. तो कई सारी नई चीजें इसने इंट्रोड्यूस करी. ठीक है? So write down. Hindu nobles had been inducted into royal service under several Muslim rulers for a long time. for a long time. Even matrimonial alliances, had existed. Full stop. However, Akbar certainly gave a new orientation to the state policy towards Rajputs. Towards Rajputs. अब हमें क्या क्या देखना है? दो इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, the features of Akbar's Rajput policy and the objectives of Akbar's Rajput policy. फीचर्स में हम क्या देखेंगे? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, Akbar's Rajput policy was based upon the strategy of carrot and stick. Carrot and stick policy पे based था. Carrot मतलब reward and stick is punishment. So Akbar made an offer to all the Rajput chiefs of the Rajputana region, Rajasthan, modern day Rajasthan, that you come and willingly submit before me. And those who did this, उनके साथ कैसा बर्ताव किया जाएगा? They would be treated quite well, given a lot of respect, prestige, and they would even be rewarded materially, right? They would even be entrusted with important imperial business, including governorship of frontier regions or even command of important military campaigns. They would also be given Vatan Jagirs. They would be given additional areas to govern, right? ये इस तरह से इनको रिवॉर्ड किया जाएगा. And those who fail to submit, they would be eliminated, they would be suppressed. ठीक है? तो they would not be spared. तो एक तो ये फीचर देखने के लिए मिला. Secondly, while matrimonial relationships had existed even previously between Muslim rulers and their Rajput counterparts, however, Akbar introduced a new element of warmth in this relationship. First of all, पहले क्या होता था? After getting married, the Rajput wives were usually forced to convert. यहाँ पर ऐसा कोई precondition नहीं था. Akbar allowed his Rajput wives to maintain their own religions and customs. Secondly, after getting married, earlier the girl was completely isolated from her previous family members. Okay? She was incorporated completely into the royal household and kept cloistered within the harem. अब क्या होगा? The Rajput wives were allowed to maintain a close and direct relationship with her family's household, with her father's household. ठीक है? Second, thirdly, while matrimonial relationships existed before also, Rajputs were generally kept away from the power center, right? They were generally seen as enemies who had to be suppressed and continuously controlled. And वो उसमें शादी एक गारंटी ऑफ गुड बिहेवियर की तरह होता था, राइट? सो इट वाज द एक्ट ऑफ मैरिज was similar to let us say hostage taking. यहाँ पे वो relationship नहीं होगा. The Rajputs who made matrimonial relationships with the Mughals were now integrated within the power structure So much so that all the Rajput relatives of Akbar, through marriage, they were given extremely important positions, not only in the imperial household, not only in the imperial government, but also in frontier regions, especially during wars. ठीक है, तो एक नया एलिमेंट ऑफ ट्रस्ट डेवलप हो गया. Thirdly, the Rajputs were given special preferences over the other elements of the nobility. So, special treatment of Rajputs was also another important feature. For example, they were the only section of the nobility to be given Vatan Jagirs. ठीक है. Further, they were allowed to rule their indigenous provinces, their indigenous states with complete autonomy internally. ठीक है, तो internal autonomy and Vatan Jagirs, these were special privileges accorded to Rajputs. Further, Rajputs were inducted not only into military service but also in non-military roles in various regions. Okay? So both military and non-military or civilian dimensions of the Mughal Rajput relationship were evident. Okay? For example, Rajputs formed the bulk of the imperial revenue collectors. ठीक है. In fact, जो central department of revenue था, the दीवाने आला, that was populated almost entirely by Rajput officers only. Secondly, they also had a very important role within the imperial military hierarchy. On several occasions, the office of Mir Bakshi was in fact occupied by a Rajput ruler. For example, for lengthy periods, Man Singh had this rule. Man Singh had this role. Right? तो ये तो हमने देख लिए फीचर्स क्या क्या थे. ऑब्जेक्टिव्स क्या थे अकबर के बिहाइंड दिस राजपूत पॉलिसी. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, Akbar's grand vision for India was territorial expansion, imperial expansion. For that, he first needed to neutralize the intensely warlike people living just to the west of Delhi, Agra region. Right? तो राजस्थान की बात कर रहे हैं एंड वहां पे राजपूत का रूल था एंड thus it was important that this region did not continuously threaten the Mughal power center. Secondly, Akbar wanted to use the power of the military power of the Rajputs to fulfill his imperialistic ambitions. Thirdly, he wanted to create an effective counterbalance against powerful Muslim nobles, such as the Afghans or the Iranis or Turanis. Fourthly, the Rajputs represented the traditional ruling elite of India and had secured their position as the legitimate ruling class among the majority of Indians, that is the Hindus. And by maintaining good relations with the Rajputs, he wanted to onboard the Hindu subjects under his rule and broaden the social base of the empire. In order to actually do this, Akbar needed to create a universal state. That means a state which served both the Muslim as well as non-Muslim subjects. Therefore, the state needed to adopt a secular religious policy, right? And यहाँ पर Akbar wanted a new class of nobles which is going to support his efforts to secularize the state. ठीक है? So he wanted to or the other objective of the Rajput policy of Akbar was to create a powerful lobby to support his secularism. And secularism in India had always been the tool used by ambitious rulers to centralize power. Okay? So finally, to promote royal despotism. ठीक है? एंड ये हो गए अकबर के राजपूत पॉलिसी के ऑब्जेक्टिव्स. नेक्स्ट क्या करना होगा हमें? इसका इवैल्यूएशन. दैट मींस कितना सक्सेसफुल था, कितना नहीं था. Was Akbar's Rajput policy successful in fulfilling these objectives? Yes, to a large degree it was successful, except for a few exceptions, such as मेवाड़. यहाँ पे रूलर कौन थे? महाराणा प्रताप. He was not ready to submit before Akbar, and therefore Akbar had to fight a lengthy war in Mewar in order to suppress it. However, it was not fruitful, and Mewar remained out of Akbar's control for the whole of his tenure, for the whole of his reign. Finally, Mewar and the Mughals came to an understanding during the reign of Jahangir. ठीक है? तो करीब 50 साल लग गए. मेवाड़ remained independent. Another problem with Akbar's Rajput policy क्या था? और क्या खामी? की राजपूत पॉलिसी की वजह से। अकबर had ended up creating an extremely powerful and entrenched class of Rajput nobles, which threatened the empire's integrity as well as the administrative centralization during the later periods. तो जहांगीर के रेन में हमें क्या देखने को मिलेगा दैट राजपूट्स इमर्ज्ड एज एन इम्पोर्टेंट पावर ब्रोकर, राइट? Some prominent Rajput rulers, such as Man Singh, opposed the accession of Jahangir, and that is why Jahangir had to take certain stern steps towards the rulers of Amir. यहाँ के मान सिंह थे, the कछवाहा डायनेस्टी, राइट? तो एक ये प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट हो गया था इसकी वजह से। थर्डली, the continued success of the Mughal Rajput relationship depended upon certain factors. क्या फैक्टर्स थे कंटिन्यूड सक्सेस के लिए? दैट द मुगल्स should first of all respect the internal autonomy of the Rajputs. Secondly, the Mughals should respect their freedom of religion. Thirdly, that the Mughals should continue to favor them over all other sections of the nobility. And lastly, that the Rajputs should be continuously and increasingly rewarded by the Mughal emperors for continued and loyal service. ठीक है? Now, Aurangzeb challenged the internal autonomy of the Rajputs. He also brought restrictions on their religious freedom. From the period of Jahangir onwards, Rajputs were no longer the favored group of the Mughals. And following the death of Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire lost its ability to continuously and increasingly reward Rajputs for loyal service. Right? Therefore, the very basis of the Mughal Rajput relationship collapsed by the later stages of the empire. And what had initially emerged as one of the biggest factors for the growth of the Mughal Empire suddenly became a major factor for its downfall. ठीक है? तो बाद के जो राजपूत्स हैं, they are going to become increasingly frustrated with the Mughals first of all, and as the Mughals themselves weakened, they are going to become more and more independent. Clear? तो ये हो गया इसका evaluation. Let us quickly write down. Akbar's Rajput policy. लिखिए. कुछ इसमें पहले लिखा है राजपूत पॉलिसी में? हाँ, तो एक इंट्रोडक्टरी पैराग्राफ बता दिया था ना? हाँ. Write down features features. Akbar adopted a carrot and stick policy, towards the Rajputs. Write down. Subpoint. Those Rajput chiefs who submitted voluntarily and accepted Mughal overlordship were handsomely rewarded. With high mansabs, important positions, command of important military campaigns, and Watan Jagirs. Along with additional territory. Full stop. Next subpoint. On the other hand, those who refused to submit were suppressed through war. Next main point. Matrimonial relationships between Rajputs and Muslim rulers were not new. However, Akbar brought a completely new dimension to these alliances. Subpoint. Firstly, Akbar did not insist on matrimonial alliances. ठीक है? Previously it had been compulsory. अब compulsory नहीं होगा. Next subpoint. Secondly, Akbar did not force his Rajput wives to convert. And instead gave them complete religious freedom. Next subpoint. Thirdly, . comma. Akbar did not isolate the Rajput wives from their ancestral homes. Next. Lastly, Akbar's Akbar did not treat his Rajput matrimonial allies as outsiders. Full stop. Rather, comma, they were inducted into the imperial household. Into the imperial household and power structure. And power structure. Next main point. पहला कैरेट एंड स्टिक, दूसरा मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंस, तीसरा स्पेशल ट्रीटमेंट. राइट डाउन नंबर 3. थर्ड मेन पॉइंट, पहला कैरेट एंड स्टिक पॉलिसी, दूसरा मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंस और तीसरा लिखो द Rajput policy of Akbar. The Rajput policy of Akbar was based upon giving special treatment and privileges to Rajputs. Full stop. These included number 1 and 2. Number 1, the restoration of the entire territory of a submitted Rajput state to its ruler of a submitted Rajput state to its ruler as Watan Jagir. Full stop. Such privileges or such a privilege was not given to any other group. Was not given to any other group. And number 2, complete autonomy in internal matters. In internal matters. ठीक है? So these were special treatments of Rajputs. And last rate, the Mughal Rajput relationship. The Mughal Rajput relationship was not simply a military relation. Full stop. Rajputs were also part of the non-military bureaucratic apparatus of the Mughal state. Of the Mughal state. The point. In fact, the revenue department, within brackets you can write Diwane Ala, was almost completely populated by Rajputs and their subordinates. By Rajputs and their subordinates. ठीक है? तो ये हो गया कि मल्टी डायमेंशनल रिलेशनशिप था, नॉट ओनली अ मिलिट्री रिलेशनशिप. These are the important features of Akbar's Rajput policy. Next heading, objectives behind Akbar's Rajput policy. अकबर, सबसे पहला लिखो, नंबर 1. Akbar wanted to create an all India empire. Wanted to create an all India empire. Full stop. However, this would not be possible if Agra was constantly threatened by the powerful Rajput chiefs of Rajasthan. Thus, it was important to pacify the Rajputana. To pacify the Rajputana. Number 2. Secondly, Akbar wanted to transform the Rajputs into loyal allies and partners. And enter India's largest military market. India's largest military market. To enlist the Rajputs as the sword arm of the empire. As the sword arm of the empire. ठीक है? Number 3. Akbar also wanted to create a more robust balance of power. Balance of power. More robust balance of power by using the Rajputs to counterbalance The Muslim nobility, to counterbalance the Muslim nobility. Number 4. Further, by integrating India's traditional Hindu elite, India's traditional Hindu elite into the imperium, comma, Akbar wanted, Akbar wanted to enlarge the social base of his empire. The social base of his empire. ठीक है? Number 5. Doing this would have required the adoption of state secularism, which would have certainly been resisted by the Muslim orthodoxy, by the Muslim orthodoxy. Full stop. Thus, Akbar needed the support of a powerful Rajput aristocracy. Next point, number 6. Secularism was Akbar's main weapon to undermine the ulema, full stop. Therefore, his Rajput policy was also part of his larger effort, to promote royal despotism, ठीक है? Next heading दो, evaluation of Akbar's Rajput policy. Write down. Akbar was successful in fulfilling all his important objectives with respect to his Rajput policy. Full stop. Sub point. With the exception of Mewar, comma, All Rajput states submitted voluntarily and Rajput commanders played a major role in expanding the Mughal Empire in all directions. In all directions. Kabul, Kandahar में leaders were Man Singh. Against Mewar, the leaders were once again Man Singh and Bhagwan Das. In the Deccan against Khandesh, once again Man Singh. Right? Next point. Further, comma, Akbar was able to mobilize the Rajputs at the imperial court to push forward his religious policy and administrative centralization. Full stop. Next sub point. He was able to use prominent Rajput chiefs to enlist the support of lower ranking Hindu officials thus providing unprecedented administrative efficiency and centralization. Administrative efficiency and centralization. ठीक है, तो ये तो हो गए पॉजिटिव आउटकम्स ऑफ द राजपूत पॉलिसी. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. डिस्पाइट दिस रिमार्केबल सक्सेस the Rajput policy of Akbar also had certain limitations. Number one, despite a long conflict comma, the Mughals were unable to subdue Mewar, which remained out of the Mughal umbrella of sovereignty till 1614. And when Jahangir was finally able to convince the new emperor, or sorry, the new Rana of Mewar, Rana Amar Singh, to submit to Mughal authority, he had to make special concessions also. For example, सबके लिए क्या rule था? That everybody would have to be present before the emperor and perform sijda and paibos. Amar Singh को बोला, you don't need to do this, simply send your son. I am going to make him a 5000 Mansabdar, give him important ranks. He can perform Sijda and Paibos in front of me. You remain at your Gaddi in Chittorgarh only. Right? इस तरह के concessions देने पड़े. Right? Secondly लिखो, तो ये हो गया एक limitation. Secondly, the Rajput policy of Akbar also created tensions within the Rajput camp. Within the Rajput camp. अब देखो, राजपूत कोई एक यूनाइटेड ग्रुप तो थे नहीं. Different Rajput rulers were governing their own little kingdoms in Rajputana, right? They were intensely jealous of each other, but Akbar gave all the positions, all the privileges only to a single family, the Kachwahas of Amer. So this caused a tension within the Rajput camp, and that was this tension actually flared up during the reign of Jahangir, right? So the Kachwahas were the political opponents of Jahangir, and Jahangir was being supported by the Bundelas. तो बाद में आकर के change करेगा, reversal करेगा. I think we have addressed this also earlier. हाँ. Next लिखो. हाँ, इसी में लिखो. Akbar had unduly favored the Kachwahas of Amer, over others, resulting in the aggravation of internal jealousies. Next, thirdly, तीसरा limitation. The Rajput policy of Akbar, characterized by Watan Jagirs and internal autonomy, created an intensely powerful Watan Jagirs and internal autonomy created an intensely powerful and entrenched class of nobles which were against the let's say interests of royal absolutism. So by promoting the Rajputs, Akbar was unconsciously promoting feudalism. ठीक है, क्योंकि unlike the other mansabdars, Rajput mansabdars hereditary थे. They had permanent control of their territories also. They enjoyed internal autonomy also. So while Akbar was preparing the blueprint for Mughal expansion, he was also preparing the blueprint for future Mughal disintegration. Right? And finally, लिखो number 4. The continued success of Akbar's Rajput experiment relied upon certain guarantees of Akbar's Rajput experiment relied upon certain guarantees from the Mughals to the Rajputs. These included 1, 2, 3, 4. Internal autonomy, religious freedom, favoritism, and fourthly, continuous rewards. Internal autonomy, religious freedom, internal autonomy, religious freedom, favoritism, and continuous rewards. Fourth, continuous rewards. Full stop. After Akbar, comma, one by one, all these guarantees were violated, were violated. And thus, the very basis of the relationship collapsed. Of the relationship collapsed. Accelerating the decline of the Mughal Empire. Accelerating the decline of the Mughal Empire. Okay? So this is the evaluation of Akbar's Rajput policy. Take down a question. Discuss the objectives and features of Akbar's Rajput policy. Was he successful in integrating the traditional Indian ruling elite into a permanent alliance with the Mughals? Question mark. $200 words. Question क्या है? Objectives and features of Akbar's Rajput policy. इनके बारे में बताना है. And secondly, critical evaluation of Akbar's Rajput policy. Was he successful in integrating the traditional Indian ruling elite, that is the Rajputs, into a permanent alliance, right? So the model created by Akbar helped the Mughals in expanding territorially very quickly. It allowed the Mughals to fulfill their other internal political priorities, objectives. It allowed them to broaden the scope, the social base of the empire. However, because this relationship was dependent upon certain guarantees, as soon as those guarantees were violated, the basis of the relationship collapsed. And instead of the Rajput alliance acting as a force behind the Mughal Empire, as a positive force behind the Mughal Empire, it played an important role in the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. So that is what we need to highlight over here. ठीक है, हो जाएगा, राइट? तो ये हो गया है अकबर. नेक्स्ट रूलर्स है जहांगीर, शाहजहां एंड औरंगजेब. तो यहाँ पर हमें बहुत सिंपली क्या देखना है? एवोल्यूशन ऑफ द रिलीजियस राजपूत एंड डेक्कन पॉलिसीज ड्यूरिंग द reigns of जहांगीर, शाहजहां एंड औरंगजेब. ठीक है, तो ये हमको कवर करना है. देन फॉलोइंग दिस, अब रिगार्डिंग औरंगजेब, क्योंकि थोड़ा controversial figure है, so there is a big debate regarding both his religious as well as Deccan policy, तो उसके बारे में भी हम देखेंगे. And following this, we'll have to address the debate regarding the level of administrative centralization within the Mughal Empire. Was it a highly centralized empire or a not so highly centralized empire? Secondly, we'll also be talking about the Mughal rural economy and the changes that it was undergoing from the 16th century onwards. We'll also be talking about the Mughal urban economy and the changes that it was undergoing since the 16th century, namely the increasing levels of commercialization. And in this context, the question of whether the sixteenth century Mughal economy had the potentiality of evolving into a European style capitalist system. ठीक है, ये एड्रेस करना है हमें. Then we'll be addressing the Mughal agrarian structure. तो लैंड होल्डिंग स्ट्रक्चर में कौन कौन सी क्लासेस थी, पेजेंट्स किस टाइप के थे, एटसेट्रा, राइट? एंड फाइनली we will be talking about the debate regarding the decline of the Mughal Empire. So broadly speaking, इतना पोर्शन अभी हमारा मुगल्स में बचा हुआ है। टुडे वी आर आउट ऑफ टाइम, तो कल सॉरी नेक्स्ट क्लास में जहांगीर से शुरू करते हैं। वी विल ट्राई टू कवर द पोर्शन अप टू औरंगजेब एंड देन इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास ये जो बचे हुए पोर्शन है इनको एड्रेस करें। ठीक है, तो आई एम थिंकिंग 2 more classes आर गोइंग टू बी रिक्वायर्ड फॉर द मुगल्स। इसके बाद मराठास के लिए प्रॉब्ली अनदर 2 or 3 classes आर गोइंग टू बी रिक्वायर्ड। ठीक है, एंड विद दैट वी विल बी एंडिंग आवर medieval इंडिया पोर्शन। हाँ, हाँ, जहांगीर, शाहजहां, औरंगजेब एक दिन में हम लोग करने की कोशिश करेंगे, हो जाएगा बिकॉज़ यहाँ पे चीज़ें थोड़ी लॉजिकली हमको चलनी है एंड मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द थिंग्स जहांगीर और शाहजहां की तो हम पहले ही डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, तो इट विल बी रेपिटिशन। एंड विद रिगार्ड्स टू औरंगजेब, मोस्ट ऑफ द डिस्कशन इज गोइंग टू टेक प्लेस इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ हिस्टोरिकल डिबेट्स। तो 2 पॉइंट्स ऑफ व्यू है रिगार्डिंग औरंगजेब, कौन सा सही है, कौन सा गलत है, वो हमको देखना पड़ेगा। दोनों पोजीशंस को ठीक से समझना पड़ेगा। और क्योंकि 3 ही डायमेंशंस में ज़्यादातर बात करनी है तो इट वोंट टेक टू मच टाइम, ठीक है? तो समझ जाओगे एक बार तो इट वोंट बी अ प्रॉब्लम। इसलिए हमारा 2.5 घंटे में आसानी से हो सकता है पूरा सेक्शन, ठीक है? एंड देन ये वाले जो पोर्शंस हैं दीज़ आर माइनर डिबेट्स, तो यहाँ पे भी बहुत ज़्यादा समझाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है। यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन पूछ चुका है, लेकिन इसमें से हर एक एस्पेक्ट से इनफैक्ट क्वेश्चन पूछ चुका है। तो लेवल ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सेंट्रलाइजेशन के ऊपर, वाज़ इट अ हाइली सेंट्रलाइज्ड एम्पायर और नॉट? तो उसमें 5-6 पॉइंट्स ऑफ व्यू हैं, वो बताने हैं आपको। मुगल रूरल इकोनॉमी में क्या चेंजेस हो रहे थे आफ्टर द बिगिनिंग ऑफ इंडियाज़ डायरेक्ट ट्रेड विद यूरोप, उसके बारे में बताना है। द पोटेंशियलिटी ऑफ कैपिटलिज्म इमर्जिंग विद इन द मुगल अर्बन इकोनॉमी, दैट हैज़ बीन आस्क्ड। एंड अग्रेरियन स्ट्रक्चर, कि अग्रेरियन स्ट्रक्चर क्या था एंड हाउ डिड द मुगल्स ट्राई टू engineer it, and finally decline of the Mughal empire. So this has been a favorite topic, अलग अलग अप्रोचेस क्या क्या हैं इसको एक्सप्लेन करती है। तो इनफैक्ट सारे थीम्स से यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन पूछ चुका है, तो विल बी ट्राइंग टू कवर दिस इन आवर नेक्स्ट टू नेक्स्ट क्लास। ठीक है, चलिए देन, दैट इज इट फॉर टुडे गाइज।